Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about a system of the body that you normally don't even think about until it stops working well. Today, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Judy Morgan. She's a world-renowned integrative and holistic veterinarian who has since retired and is also a best-selling author of 4 amazing books. And she's going to help us learn all things immune system. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
No pressure. So let's talk about a dog's immune system. What does it do?
Well, if you have a good one, for any species, if you have a good immune system, it keeps you from getting sick. And if you have an immune system that is overworked, overstressed, or not working correctly, everything can go wrong. Right. So a good immune system is a really good thing to have.
And it's really important. And a lot of people, I think, don't even pay attention to it. I know for ourselves as humans, and especially with our pets, it's really the last thing we think about with our pets. So,
but we think about it when it's not working, when things go wrong.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, crap.
So hopefully what we're going to do today is teach people about the different parts of the immune system and really get them thinking proactively so that they can make certain their dogs have or cats have the safest and strongest immune system possible. So is there a way that you can actually measure a dog's their immune health?
No. Not a really accurate way. We do some tests that we think are telling us some answers, but there are some parts of the immune system that are just really impossible to measure, and we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. For just as a quick example, when we give vaccines, a lot of times we'll run titers, which is a blood test, and it says, oh, they have antibodies against distemper, and you go, oh, good, he's above this arbitrary number that we set. That means he's protected. That's awesome. Well, okay, the numbers are a little bit arbitrary, and we have dogs that have 0 on those tests, and then you challenge them with distemper virus and they don't get sick. We have other dogs that have a high number on that test and you challenge them and they get sick. So it's kind of the same with people. So for instance, I had a technician and we were working emergency service about 2:00 in the morning, and this kitten came in and I did the full exam on the kitten. The kitten lived outside in an apartment complex, and somebody was nice enough to rescue this poor little sick kitten and bring it in at 2:00 in the morning, and said, well, we don't really know what's wrong with it, but it doesn't seem to be eating well, and it's just been acting kind of lethargic. And so I do my full exam, like oral exam, the whole exam on this cat. And when I'm done, like literally hands off, backed away, the little kitten who was sitting on the table, seeming fine, literally turned into Cujo, leaped off the walls and started attacking everyone and bit all of us multiple times, like 7 or 8 bite wounds each. It was rabid. And I don't even know that I ever would have even thought of it, but my technician just kind of went, wow, maybe we should check this cat for rabies. And I went, oh, crap. And yes, it was rabid. Now, so of course we had to go get treatment. And I had a rabies vaccine like 10 years before that. And I had an experimental rhesus monkey vaccine in vet school. Because, when you're the vet students, you are experimented on. And so I had never had a titer done. I had no idea if I had protection. They ran a titer and then started me on the prophylaxis. And my titer was great. And I got my 5 shots in the prophylaxis. My technician had been vaccinated as well. And when they went to give her the prophylaxis, she had an anaphylactic reaction. And we can talk about that later if you want. But basically, she almost died from getting the injection. So she still had to go through the entire series of either 5 or 7 vaccines. I forget what it was we had to get. And so every time they had to give her one, she had to be hospitalized on IV fluids, epinephrine, steroids to get through the treatment. She didn't get rabies, which was a good thing. And at the end of all of that, her titer was 0. Wow. 0. So she did not mount an immune response, supposedly, according to the blood work, after all of those treatments, yet she didn't get rabies. So clearly something worked. So do we have an accurate way to measure the immune system? Don't know.
And from the example you just gave, it just further supports the fact that we're all individuals, right? And you
Yeah,
really can't generalize across the board. And when we're talking about our pets, what's good for one dog may not be good for another dog, and et cetera,
exactly.
et cetera. Um,
Exactly.
so immunodeficiency versus autoimmune disease. It's something that, I don't hear about a lot of dogs that have autoimmune diseases, but there are
There's a lot.
there are many, many out there. And so can you just describe the difference between like an immunodeficiency and an autoimmune disease? Because I don't feel like many people understand it's a wildly uh, different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's actually opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So immune deficiency is actually something that we don't like, a true inborn immune deficiency, like being born not able to produce immune globulins, IgA, IgG, IgM. And it never dawned on me that was even a thing, because it's not something we see very often. But I had a couple of young dogs and cats that just seemed to be sick all the time. They weren't thriving. They had GI issues. And so I started testing, and it's hard to even find labs that will test immune globulin levels. And all of a sudden I was finding animals that had immune deficiency, like zero ability. So here we are, we've got these puppies and kittens, we're poking them with all these vaccines, and then I'm discovering that, hey, these guys don't even have the building blocks of an immune system, so they can't respond to anything, and they're sick all the time, they have GI problems. The good news is a lot of them will kind of if you can keep them alive until they're a year old, then they kind of settle in and they're able to survive. So that's a true immune deficiency. It's not that common, but I did see quite a few in practice. The opposite end of the spectrum is autoimmune disease. And that's where the immune system so the immune system is supposed to attack foreign invaders in the body. So, your neighbor's puppy has parvovirus, and it comes over and it poops its bloody diarrhea and vomits on your lawn. And then your dog goes out there and walks through it and licks his paws and gets this huge load of parvovirus into his system. Well, if his immune system works, which are the white blood cells, the immune globulins, all the red blood cells, all the things in the body that are that's the innate immune system that's supposed to work, it'll neutralize that virus, and it'll say, hey, you're not allowed in here. We're kicking you out, and it'll get rid of it if we have a good immune system. But sometimes the body goes a little haywire and the immune system starts attacking everything. We see this a lot with synthetic things that are put into the body. So synthetic vitamins and minerals, for instance, which is why I'm such a huge fan of feeding whole foods and getting our nutrition from whole food supplements, not from synthetics. But anytime we put something foreign into the body, the immune system has to react to it. Well, sometimes the immune system is like trying to attack so many things and it gets oversensitized. And so not only is it attacking those foreign invaders, but it may start attacking the body itself. So it could attack kidney cells, skin cells, red blood cells, white blood or platelets, even white blood cells.
And it's attacking healthy cells. It's not
Right.
attacking sick cells. It's the healthy
Right.
cells.
So
Right.
it can attack. So an autoimmune disease is when your immune system attacks your normal healthy cells in the body. So we get things like lupus, pemphigus, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, autoimmune thrombocytopenia, autoimmune polyarthropathy, which is attacking the joints.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different autoimmune diseases that we can see. And so it's not, so what we do with those is, we want to jump in and suppress the immune system. If you're a traditional veterinarian, you want to throw about 16 different immunosuppressants at the animal and try to wipe everything out. And, sometimes you have to attack pretty heavily at the beginning just to get over the hump and keep them alive. But then it's really not about suppressing the immune system. It's about calming it and evening it out and retraining it to react appropriately. So, it's kind of your spouse gets home late from work and you can go, oh, gee, did you hit traffic? Was there a problem? Or you can be that screaming maniac as soon as they walk in the door and just start yelling at them. So that's the immune system just like yelling at everybody because it's mad, instead of just going, something's not quite right here.
So now, just for the clarity of our viewers, let's talk about allergies, right? Because allergies are much different than autoimmune disease, much different than immune deficiency. What causes allergies? What type of immune response is that?
So there's actually 4 different levels of allergic reaction, and it's a lot to get into. But so the worst one is the anaphylactic reaction, where your body says, holy crap, and everything swells up, you can't breathe, you're vomiting, you got diarrhea, you're passing out, your blood pressure drops, you're in shock. That's the worst one. But what we tend to see is, milder allergic reactions. And I know for those people who are dealing with animals that are scratching their skin off and they're a bloody pulp, they don't think that's mild, but compared to anaphylaxis, it's mild. So allergies happen from repeated exposure to something. So when I get people who say, oh, my 8-week-old puppy has allergies, they really can't. Like they haven't been exposed yet. Like they can't. So for kind of the true allergies, we don't see those until the animals are over a year of age, because let's say it's a seasonal allergy to a certain pollen. Well, they have to have been exposed to it the first year and their body got sensitized to it. Like their immune system said, oh, God, I don't like all that pollen from those pine trees. That's kind of obnoxious. So the first year, the body will react in a normal way, which is, the eyes might run a little bit, the nose might run, they might sneeze more, because that's when you get the watery eyes and the runny nose. That's the body trying to wash that stuff out of the system. So you cough maybe because you're inhaling that stuff. For our dogs, it tends to cause the itchy skin. But then every year it'll get a little worse and a little worse because the immune system got sensitized to it. And now, so like dogs with flea bite allergy, they get fleas as a puppy and like they do the normal flea itching. And then if they become sensitized to the flea saliva, the next year, the first bite they get, I have one of these, one bite, man, he's going to rip himself open. So that's just the immune system getting sensitized and hyper reactive.
Being overstimulated.
So it becomes overreactive.
It's not necessarily, and it's not at all, because of a weak immune system. It's actually the opposite. It's actually an overly exuberant immune system.
Exactly. It's like, instead of quietly asking why all that pollen is in the body goes, oh my God, what are you doing here? I have to get rid of you, and goes nuts.
So I want to get into the different parts of the immune system, the innate immune system and the adaptive. But before we do, I know what I think causes the dog's immune system to weaken as far as like environmental factors and whatnot. And there are a lot of obviously, internal by vaccines, over vaccination. But can you talk to different causes from a medical standpoint that weaken the immune system and expose our animals?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of things wrong, for one thing. And it's interesting because I was just talking about this to somebody else the other day, but we need to start off with a healthy microbiome. And the microbiome, we talk about the gut all the time, but it's not just the gut. We have a microbiome on our skin. We have a microbiome in our respiratory tract. We have a microbiome from our mouth all the way down to the other end of the digestive tract. So the microbiome is everywhere. Interestingly, now that, we have certain breeds that kind of have a hard time being born other than by C-section. So when you're born, you don't have a microbiome. Everything's sterile inside the womb. On the way out, passing through the reproductive tract to get to the outside of mom, you pass through mom's reproductive tract where there's a microbiome, and that's your first exposure to a microbiome. Well, guess what breeds have a lot more immune problems, allergy problems? Those who are being born by C-section. They miss out on the microbiome from the first minute of life. So they're not getting inoculated. Their immune system is not getting inoculated with exposure to what it needs, and it's not getting exposure to the good guys, the good bacteria, the good viruses, the good fungi that we need in our body to fight off things. So that's part of the problem. If you have an animal who's born by C-section, there is a somewhat genetic component. There was a great study out of Finland a couple years ago where they looked at dogs who the parents had allergies, and then they looked at if the puppies had allergies. And if both parents had allergies, the chances of the puppies having allergies are like, good luck. If one parent had it, it was still really high. And it actually had to do also with the diet the animals were fed. So if the mom was kibble fed and the puppies were weaned onto kibble and there was allergies in the family history, the chances of the allergies being worse in the young dogs as they grew were much higher. If the mom was raw fed and the puppies were immediately started on raw fed, the chances were much lower. So and I can only look at that and think, well, okay, what's the difference between a kibble fed dog and a raw fed dog? The kibble fed dog has a lot of synthetic vitamins and minerals added in. So remember, I said synthetics are foreign invaders. The body doesn't recognize them as something natural to the body. So that's part of what they're reacting to. But when we have a high heat processed food, we also have endotoxins from the bacteria that are killed in that heat processing. We have aflatoxins from the molds that are in the grains that are in there or the legumes that are in there. So there's so many. So it makes perfect sense. And it was a great study that showed, the allergies can be related to what the mom ate or what the mom's mom ate, and also how the puppy is delivered into the world. So that's a couple of factors. Then we start really messing with things and we start vaccinating way too early. We give multiple vaccines at the same time. So most people think I'm going in and I'm getting this one shot for my puppy. That one shot might have 13 different things in it. So it may have distemper, parvo, 4 different leptos, para-influenza. You may be getting, 2 influenzas at the same time. You might get a Lyme at the same, you might get the rabies on there as well. So, and then there's Bordetella, which usually contains 3 or 4 organisms. So by the time you add all that together, I just feel like that would be like walking into a party and having 15 people go, whoop, and they all want an answer at the same time. And my response will be like, holy crap, I don't even know where to start. So like there's so many things that we do wrong. And then we have environmental toxins that the body reacts to. We have, the chemicals that we're putting on in our pets, chemical shampoos, chemical treatments. I mean, and then we keep screwing up the microbiome by overusing antibiotics and using things, dewormers and things that are killing the gut microbiome. And I'm not saying that we never never want to use those things. I'm just saying we need to look at this from a whole different lens.
If you think about it, we really are setting our animals up to fail. And it's surprising at the longevity of life that they do have with all that we do so wrong, if you really think about it,
Exactly. Well, and on the other side of that, I will say, having a holistic practice for a long time, I did have clients who did everything right as far as diet and no vaccines and, good, emotional support, blah, blah, blah. And then their animal still comes up with a cancer or something really wonky. So, whether genetics plays a role in that or what the issue is, you can still do everything right and still have an outcome that, kind of is a little shocking. But certainly you have a better chance of having health and longevity if you are not trying to wreck their immune system every day.
I am fortunately am one of those people that I did everything right. There were no vaccines. There were no flea and ticks. There were, puppy vaccines, but everything was tighter. We had the blood tested. He ate raw food. He got his exercise. He had a no stress environment. He had play dates. We did everything right. And unfortunately, even with all the supplements that, antioxidants and medicinal mushrooms and the turmeric and everything to try to scramble those channels so that cancer didn't take part, it did set in. So you can really only do the best that you can, but
Exactly.
knowledge is what's really important because you at least set them up. I feel that my boy definitely lived a longer period of time because of his lifestyle and how he ate than if we had fed him differently. So
Yeah,
got a gift of extra time
absolutely.
for him. And he had the gift of an amazingly happy life where he felt great throughout. And then when it ended, it went downhill real fast. So that's all we can ask, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, Sorry. So I always have to talk about Diego in some way, shape, or form. That was my boy. So the two parts of the system, we have the innate and we have the adaptive. And obviously the innate is like the first line of defense. And then you have
Right.
the
So that's your white blood cells, your platelets, the immune globulins, the proteins that your body makes to help fight off disease. So, and your microbiome, that's part of that. That's what you get from living in the world and playing in the soil. And, it's what you're born
Hold on,
with.
stop that thought right there. Playing in the soil. Can we please talk about this? Everyone that gets a puppy, they're told, don't let them be exposed to things. Please tell the truth. What should we be doing with our puppies?
Well, let's see. Mine gets to eat chicken poop, goat poop, donkey poop, horse poop, other dogs poop, cat poop, dirt, grass, my potted plants, they're in the garden. As a child, looking back at the time, I was really angry at my sister, but looking back on it, it's like, wow, probably the best thing she ever could have done. But we used to play outside and we would play, kitchen, and she would take a stick and dip it in the mud and tell me it was like my, dinner, and I would eat the dirt off the stick. And looking back on it, it's like, got inoculated with some pretty good stuff, probably.
Soil-based probiotics.
My soil
best,
probiotics.
Right?
But there's great studies in children who are raised with animals and play outside a lot and are in the dirt, and maybe mom doesn't make them wash their hands all that. Like my kids, they grew up in a barn. They grew up with a crap ton of animals. We'd be at a horse show. They'd be dirty. They'd be mucky, and they'd eat their hot dog, with those hands that were just grooming the horse and cleaning its butt. So, they're inoculated with some good stuff. But then we look at people who live in, the pristine home where you are literally using antibacterial scrub on every surface and your kids aren't allowed to touch anything and they're not inoculated with anything. And guess who ends up with a weaker immune system?
Yeah, I would imagine. And the dogs that you saw that maybe came from a city, right, that didn't get their paws on the ground in the grass, that were just kind of in that concrete sidewalk, probably were more sick.
It kind of depends, because you'd be amazed the crap that's on the concrete sidewalks if your
True.
dog's walking barefoot.
That's true. That's
That's
true.
why the woman who developed walkie paws, she lives in New York City and she has a little white dog, and she's like, I don't want that dog walking through the street with its white paws and then getting in my bed.
Very, very valid point. Very valid point. I'm sorry to get off on a tangent. So we were talking about the the innate system. How about the adaptive immune system?
So the adaptive system is acquired. So when we give a vaccine, we are giving an exposure to parvovirus. We give a killed virus by injection. And so that's the hey, immune system, look over here, come attack this guy. And so then the body makes antibodies against that thing that was injected or the exposure. So that's acquired. And that really is mostly the antibodies in the body. And that's what we're trying to measure with our titers. But there are parts of the immune system that we really can't get to measure. So there's something called a humoral response, which is the cellular response. And we can't measure that. Like we can't pull out a bunch of cells and go, hey, look inside and, what do you got in there? So there's parts that we can't measure. And so when we get these animals that have no titer, what we end up saying is, oh, well, in order to get into daycare, boarding, grooming, whatever, we have to show that they have protection. Well, that's the only way that we know to measure right now. So we end up giving them a booster vaccine. And some of these animals will never, ever, ever develop a measurable titer, kind of like my technician. She was clearly protected, But some of them will never develop a titer. And what happens is they just keep getting poked and poked and poked with the vaccine year after year after year. And they just don't mount a response that we can measure. It doesn't mean that there's no response there. We just can't measure it.
So when we are trying to be proactive in making our pet's immune system as strong as possible, really we're talking about specifically the gut microbiome, right? That's
That's a
really
lot of it.
That's where 70%. Well, there's a few stats between 70 to 80% now is where it's moving along that axis there. But that's where most of what we can do for our animals is by dealing with that, as well as more natural food, staying away from synthetic vitamins, keeping them in a stress-free zone. The gut microbiome, innate immune access, I know is being studied really intensely right now. Can you explain to our viewers what that access is? What's the connection? Beyond,
Well,
like a little bit more deeply than what we've just talked about.
so the microbiome, it's interesting. I just had to do a prepared talk on this. So the microbiome is it's crucial, and it literally has trillions of organisms in it. And like I said, it's not just in the gut, it's other places in the body. So if our microbiome in our respiratory tract got really out of whack, we would be more prone to respiratory illnesses. The dogs and cats that have really bad mouths, tons of tartar, like my dog that's in heart failure, kidney failure, and has protein losing enteropathy has a horrible mouth, even though he had a dental within a month or two. Horrible mouth again. And it's because his microbiome in his mouth is totally screwed up from all the meds that he's on and all the other things going on with his body. So he has a microbiome that it doesn't matter how many probiotics I throw at it, I can't correct it because he's got all these issues and medications that he has to be on to stay alive. So the microbiome can get out of whack for a lot of different reasons. Diet is one of the main reasons. So we need to feed a species appropriate diet that will give the microbiome that is specific and appropriate for that species. So a cat has a different microbiome from a dog, which is different from an herbivore, which is different from an omnivore. So we have to feed the right diet to get the right microbiome. The microbiome, we talk about probiotics all the time, but the microbiome is not just bacteria. It is also viruses. It is also fungi. It's also some parasites. So that's why when we do things like give a dewormer or give an antibiotic or an antiviral or an antifungal, we don't knock off just we're like, oh, we got a staph infection, I'm going to give him an antibiotic. It'll kill all the staph. Yeah, you killed all the staph and everybody and his boyfriend too. So, it's, you wreck everything when you do that. And then it takes the body time to repair. And so when we get dysbiosis, which can be from stress, it can be from environmental factors, it can be from diet, it can be from medications that are given. We can screw it up so many ways. And so then we have to try to reset it and bring it back to where it needs to be. And the ways to reset it are, we got to feed the good guys, the good army that we want down there. So we feed them with the prebiotics, which is really the fibers. That's what they live on. So we have the prebiotics. Then we add probiotics, which are really bacteria, but we can also, like Saccharomyces boulardii, we don't talk about that one enough, but that's a yeast or fungal organism that sometimes we have to replace that in order to get that population getting back in the right direction. Sometimes the pH is completely wrong in the gut because we've got the wrong bacteria growing in there. And then, if things are just really going awry, sometimes we're down to, okay, we've done all that, it's not working, we need a complete fecal transplant. It's like, we need to get rid of all these bad guys. Let's throw a good army in there and help them rebuild their forces and get things back to normal. So that's where, when we test the gut microbiome, and we should see, I don't know what the numbers are, but we should see 20 subspecies of the bacteria, and that's done through DNA sequencing. So we want to see 20 species of bacteria, and then we get these samples back and it's like, oh, he has 3. Like, well, where'd everybody else go?
And yes, a non-diversified gut microbiome, and the levels are really high on those three.
Right. So, and we've got great studies now that are showing like the gut brain axis. So the microbiome does a lot. It decreases inflammation in the bowel when you have enough good guys because they're making short chain fatty acids. Those short chain fatty acids form a mucosal barrier. So in lining our airways, we have a nice little mucosal barrier. Lining our gut, we have a mucosal barrier. And when we don't have the correct food to feed those good guys, and then we don't have enough of those good guys, we lose the short chain fatty acid production. We lose the mucosal barrier. That's when we get the leaky gut because we have inflamed cells and they spread apart. Instead of having these real tight junctions, they do this and things start to get absorbed into the bloodstream that normally would not be able to get there. So, this is how we start developing some of those food intolerances. It's like, oh, well, the dog ate chicken and the chicken broke down into these protein particles that were small enough to get absorbed through that leaky gut into the bloodstream. And then the immune system goes, whoa, that's not supposed to be here. Like that's supposed to live in the bowel. Like what's it doing here? And then you get the reactions and the intolerances and the allergies. So, and we've also got huge evidence of that dysbiosis in the microbiome causing behavior issues, cognitive issues, learning problems. So when you when you have those dogs that you say, oh, he's untrainable, or he's aggressive, or he's scared all the time, or overreactive to loud noises, look at their gut because they probably have dysbiosis going on, and they're literally out of their mind because their gut isn't right.
And look at what they're eating. Most of them, unfortunately,
Absolutely.
are eating kibble that are filled with preservatives and food dyes and all
and
of
that's why the first thing on the list
synthetic.
is species appropriate diet using whole foods.
Absolutely. So how else can we naturally boost the dog's immune system besides, species appropriate whole food first diet? Minimal processing is possible.
Well, stop attacking it for one thing. So we stop giving them synthetics, stop giving them chemicals, stop giving them so many vaccines or any vaccines if they've already had them once. If I have somebody that I'm really trying to boost, I will add colostrum. I don't add colostrum all the time, but if we're having a little struggle period, it can really help them. It's just giving them a little boost. Vitamin D levels, really critical for the immune system to function well. So there's a lot of micronutrients that we don't really think about all the time that we need to make sure that we're getting in there. And that's where, even if you're feeding a human grade whole food diet, if you've really strayed from where you need to be to have it even close to balanced, or you get really stuck in that rut of, oh, well, I was feeding him this balanced diet that had 20 ingredients and now we're down to hamburger, rice, and peas. Well, that, it's just not going to work.
No.
So, it happens with time. We all get a little bit lazy and it's like me.
Yeah, you're right. It's unfortunate, right? Because
it is, but life happens
on the system.
So this is just a little heads up. If you were feeding like all these different things and getting the nice whole foods, in my world you have to color the rainbow with your diet. So if you've strayed away from that and you've gotten down to feeding the same thing every meal, or gotten down to only having a few ingredients and you're really far off from balance, take another look and start getting some other things onto that platter or into that bowl, however you're feeding them.
And there are a lot of whole food vitamins out there that have no synthetics in there. So you don't necessarily have to go buy the food. You can buy the supplements if you really want to be lazy.
Well, like I said, sometimes life. But even when I'm feeding my dogs, I feed raw, and when I'm feeding them a commercial balanced diet, I'm still adding things. Like
absolutely.
There are certain things that I need omega-3s. I need extra omega-3s because my dogs all have heart problems. I need deer antler velvet, again, because they have heart problems, they have neurologic problems. Trying trying to think what else I throw. There's a lot of stuff I throw in their
So
bowls.
therapeutic mushrooms are, to me,
Therapeutic
they should
mushrooms.
be on every dog's diet, right?
Yes. Yep.
And
So we have
then-
mushrooms in there. I have bee pollen for my little guy who's
Yeah.
got all kinds of issues.
So my husband laughs at me because when I make my Lola's food bowl in the morning, I put the bee pollen in her bowl and then I put some in my hand and I take it back. He's like, "You're taking her supplements." I'm like, "Well, technically she's taking mine."
Yeah, I was going to say we share a lot.
Yeah,
we share a lot of our mushrooms.
Yeah, well, the therapeutic mushrooms, and I always say therapeutic because people think psilocybin. We're not talking about psilocybin, but mushrooms are a phenomenal immunomodulator.
Yeah.
And for those people that don't know what that means, I'm hoping that you might be able to explain that a little bit to them.
So remember when I talked about evening out the immune system and making it function the way that we want it to, not being overreactive, not being underreactive? That's kind of what the mushrooms do. And part of why the mushrooms work so well, besides they have all these wonderful chemicals in them that do really good things for our body, but they're also an incredible fiber source so as a prebiotic for the good little army that we're trying to brew down below. And that good little army really likes them. So
and they're adaptogens. So it's an adaptogen herb too, or plant. Fungi.
So they provide and we use different mushrooms for different things. Like I take lion's mane mushroom, and that's what we give our little dog for brain and nerve health because he's got hydrocephalus, and I just have a brain that's a sieve these days. We use different, like reishi is the mushroom of immortality. We use turkey tail a lot for cancer problems. So there's, or you can just say, hey, I'm going to do a blend of 5 mushrooms, throw it all in there. It's fine. I use shiitake mushrooms in so many of my recipes because I think they're so amazing. They just do so many things for the body. So those are ways that we can, kind of even out the immune system and because again, we're feeding the microbiome because that's something it really likes. So it works from a lot of different angles.
I love that. And I love mushrooms. I really think everyone on this planet, humans, dogs, cats, everyone should be on mushrooms. I really, truly do. Just don't go out and pick them on your own, right? So please don't take them.
I wouldn't dare. No. I've got mushrooms popping up all over outside. I'm like, I don't know what that is.
I just saw some maitake at the base of one of my trees. It's a little bit early, but our weather's been kind of strange. So I will be harvesting that. And
that would be nice.
So I want to dry it for soup. I'll end up eating it over the next 2 days, and then I'll be looking for more.
That is very cool. No, we're just growing these humongous big white things. I don't know what they are, but they're kind of coming up everywhere.
So antioxidants, talking again about whole food and variety, right? Everything is kind of about diversity, as you were mentioning. And I'm a big fan of rotating different supplements in, just to have that diversity. Can you explain a little bit more as to why that's important and some other antioxidant sources that you might not have thought of that you give to your dogs on a regular basis?
So oxidation is the process of, it's actually an inflammatory process. The easiest way to kind of think about it, when you get a package of meat from the grocery store, like a package of hamburger, and it's kind of brown on the surface, and then you slice into the middle of it and it's that nice bright red. Well, the brown on the surface is oxidation. That's where it was exposed to air, it was exposed to oxygen, and it does that. So rust is on iron. That's a form of oxidation. So our cells are undergoing oxidation. And the level of oxidation depends on a lot of things, aging, what toxins we put into our body, what food we put into our body. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. So an antioxidant kind of is the anti-aging, trying to make your cells stay happier longer. And our body, when we are young, so when the dogs are young, makes tons of antioxidants like CoQ10 and vitamin D. As we get older, we don't do that so well. So those levels will drop. And for instance, CoQ10, you can also call it ubiquinol, so critical in so many functions,
especially to keep heart health.
Yeah, but to keep cells in general alive, like the mitochondria need it. So when those levels are dropping, particularly in our older animals or animals who are sick, animals with cancer, vitamin D falls in this category as well. As animals age, even if you are feeding a diet that is complete and balanced on paper, that doesn't necessarily mean that your pet will absorb it as well or utilize it as well. So it's amazing. One of my best examples of this, I have a client who was making my pup loaf and then also feeding a commercial brand of raw that I highly recommend. And so both diets complete and balanced. And she had a young dog and an old dog. She had vitamin D levels tested. Normal for that lab was 100 to 150. The young dog came out at about 86 and the old dog came back like 42. And she said, "Oh my gosh, like I thought I was feeding complete and balanced diet." I'm like, "You are." That's just what your dogs are able to utilize or not utilize. And it also depends how long the product was frozen, how long it sat. Was it made 6 months ago? Was it made yesterday? Because the fat soluble vitamins will degrade, but it's really how the body is able to utilize it. So, I've got a great blog on vitamin D on my website and all the different things that go wrong when you are low in vitamin D. Things like cancer, inability to digest your food well. I mean, just it's so important for so many things. So I strongly recommend that everybody test at least once a year, but really twice a year for vitamin D levels, particularly in their senior dogs, because it's critical. And then CoQ10, frankly, if you have a dog that's a breed prone to heart disease, go ahead and start them by 4 or 5 years of age. And if you have one that has heart disease, up your levels. I give 5 to 10 milligrams per pound of body weight twice a day, which is way above what it's labeled for, but that's where we need it to be. There's great studies. A second one just came out. Most of them are being done in the Far East, interestingly, like Singapore. But these studies are showing that we could actually shrink heart size in these animals who are going into heart failure just with the addition of CoQ10 at these high levels. So that's how critical the antioxidants are. And there's a lot of different things that you can use for antioxidants. Fish, very high antioxidant levels. Fish oils, if you have a good one, make sure it's not rancid. Egg yolks, high antioxidant level. Some of the orange and yellow veggies, red veggies, very, very good antioxidants. Fruits like blueberries.
I love spirulina.
Spirulina is great.
Spirulina.
So, whether you're using a dried powder product or a fresh product, but so this is why, even though my dogs are fed really high quality raw diets made by companies that I adore, I'm still throwing things in there. Yeah. Because I want to add that extra antioxidant. I will throw like fermented things in there. As a matter of fact, I just made a bunch of frozen treats, and it's got a product in it. It has bone broth in it, some coconut chips that I throw it all in the NutriBullet. Bone broth, coconut chips, a fermented green product. Am I allowed to say names here? It was a green juju product.
I love them.
And then
actually, I'm really excited about their new beet and golden paste.
I've been using those this week. So my dogs have the little blob of green, the little blob of orange, and the little blob of red on the corners of their plates. It's so much fun. But I threw all this, and then I had some cut up fruit in the fridge, which was cantaloupe, strawberry, banana, and blueberry. And so I threw all this into my little NutriBullet and then put it in my little molds and threw it in the freezer. The dogs love this. So,
awesome.
I just love going to my cabinet where all my dog stuff is and just pulling out different things and then going in the pantry or the refrigerator and going, this would be good for them. And then, I just start experimenting and throwing things together. And if I run out of their little frozen treats at night, they're really mad.
So you mentioned fermented products. And so this will be one of the last questions, because I know I've taken a lot of your time and I really appreciate it. In supporting the microbiome, right? Adding in fermented products really does provide such a variety of bacteria strains that helps to diversify the different colonies. And just speak to that, because not all fermented foods, for instance, right? Beer and wine are fermented, but they don't provide probiotics, right? And they're toxic to our dogs. But let's think about some other fermented products that can be helpful. And would you stay away from soy-based fermented products because of the potential for it to be an endocrine disruptor?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of soy for animals, period. So there's I just had Billy Hookman at my house for the weekend. So the king of fermentation. So he ferments everything. If you get to talk to him, ask him about his poop cheese. That was not a good fermentation. But it's, so whether you're fermenting whole raw milks, like whole goat milk or whole cow's milk, and it's easy to do. I mean, literally, if you have a probiotic, throw it in the raw milk, sit on your counter for 24 hours, you now have a fermented product. You can ferment veggies. It can sometimes be a little trickier, but I mean, people have been making kimchi for ages. So there's just so many different ways that you can do it. Get some active apple cider vinegar, like the Bragg's apple cider vinegar, that's got a mother in it. That'll start to ferment things. So, but the fermented foods, what we're doing is we're adding a natural source of billions, if not trillions, of good guys. So you don't need a lot, like a little bit will go a long way at inoculating the gut and helping repopulate it with what we want it to have. And frankly, we are not capable of measuring all the different species of bacteria and virus and fungi that live in our gut and in our lungs and on our skin.
Well, and it changes, right? It changes from day to day, second to second.
It does. And every time you change the diet, so for humans, we eat something different every meal, at least most of us do. For our dogs, they should be eating different things too, and the microbiome will change. And the gut is very adaptive, and it will do that with no problem. And this is where I get really angry with put the same thing in the bowl every day, never vary. Like the nutritionists who formulate diets for people with dogs with, IBS or kidney disease or whatever their problem is. And they're like, here's your protein, here's your carb, here's your veggie, here's your synthetic vitamin. Don't vary from that. Don't ever put anything else in the bowl. That is a bunch of crap. Like, they're not going to be healthy with that. There's just so many problems with that. But we also have to consider that on the skin. So how often are we bathing with products that are killing the skin microbiome? How often are we destroying the skin microbiome? And that's kind of our first line of defense. It kind of covers most of our body.
Yeah. I mean, and technically, if you are feeding a dog appropriately, they're not going to stink. You're not going to need to give them baths. I might give my dogs a bath once a year, and that's just because they might have rolled in poop, and I
have to do my boys who pee on their feathers. Their aim is not good.
I really appreciate all of your time and all of your knowledge and being able to share that with us. If people want to learn more, how can they find you?
drjudymorgan.com. Really simple.
Yeah, super simple. I really appreciate your time again. It's always a pleasure talking with you and learning from you. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Take care.